I'm John Travis in Novato, California, on the 15th of May, 2020, talking to Vic Sierpina in Galveston, Texas. Welcome, Vic.
Hi, Jack.
So today I'm going to get to know you. We've got lots of mutual friends and I've been hearing a lot about you, but this is our first meeting. And I want to find out who you are and why, like where you were born, what your parents' environment was like, what they did, siblings, birth order, early school experiences, when you decided to become a doctor, and then we'll get into what you've done. So,
whoa, the story of my life. Do you think anybody's really interested?
Well, I think so, yeah.
Well, as long as you are, I'll do my best.
Okay.
So I was born in 1949. I was the oldest of four siblings. I was born at a small rural hospital in Massachusetts. My grandparents owned a small family-owned dairy farm, and we lived there in that farmhouse for about 2.5 years with my uncles, my cousins, my grandparents. Everybody spoke only Polish at home, so my only language was Polish until at age 2.5, I told my dad I couldn't get a job, so let's move to Phoenix. So we moved to Phoenix, and at that time I had a 1-year-old brother. My dad is by trade is an auto mechanic. It's a trade that he learned on the farm, but also in the Army. He was a World War II Pearl Harbor survivor. And so I was raised in Phoenix, went to Catholic grade school, Jesuit high school for 1 year, then public high school after that. Arizona State University for undergraduate. I was going to marine biology actually, and took a semester as a marine biology student at Oregon State, but was hopelessly seasick whenever I got on the ship. So
not good.
Did that and some other kind of life factors moved me to move back to Phoenix. And for several years, I worked in a trucking company. I kind of worked my way through college, moving furniture and freight, driving trucks, forklifts, things like that. So I did that for about 4 years. Got transferred up to Chicago and decided that I didn't really want to stay in the trucking business. I had a degree in biology and applied for medical school. And the owner of my company, very interestingly, Dave Grable, he was a Christian Scientist. So Christian Scientists don't really use medicine, right? So I was a little timorous about asking him if he would support me if I applied to medical school. David tragically had a daughter who was 7 years old, got meningitis, and the Christian Science didn't allow for use of any antibiotics and such, and she passed. But she was, that was history. But he was very supportive. They kept me, I was operations manager at a Grable trucking terminal in Beloit, Wisconsin, Palatine, Illinois. And I was able to get to medical school at the University of Illinois. I was very interested before I got into medical school in kind of all manner of natural healing. My mother always used to keep Prevention magazine as toilet reading for us in the house. And I kind of got grown up, fairly poor family. Honestly, my dad, mechanic, maybe made 60, 70 bucks a week or 100 bucks a week, something like that in the 50s. But so we did a lot of home remedies, and I kind of was always interested in that. And then during college, I was in the hippie era of the 60s, so everything was going back to nature, and herbals and non-traditional healing started to kind of come up for me a lot. And then even after college, I kind of studied mind-body medicine, biofeedback, cybernetics, brain science, neuroscience, but also kind of natural healing. So when I came to medical school, I had that kind of background. I wanted to go into family medicine. I wanted to be a country doctor, honestly. It's what I wanted to do. And so finished medical school. I was in the independent study track, so I was able to basically design my own curriculum, which I oriented around three axes. One was primary care, one was holistic medicine, and the other was child psychiatry and biobehavioral health. The holistic medicine was interesting. It was spelled with a W, W-H-O-L-I-S-T-I-C.
Mm-hmm.
Granger Westberg had been a minister and chaplain at the University of Chicago. And his view was that doctors' offices shouldn't be in a clinic over a pharmacy or in an office building in the hospital, but it could be in a church. And so there's many large churches that, as you know, sit empty most of the week. So his idea was that the healthcare team would be a physician that had a holistic orientation, a holistic nurse, and a pastoral counselor. And those would be the professional side of the team. And the fourth member, of course, was the patient. And the patient was involved in all planning of their healthcare. And so that was another opportunity that I did longitudinally throughout medical school and even in residency, working in those holistic health centers to gather a better perspective on non-pharmacological and holistic approaches to health, including mind, body, and spirit. So that kind of took me through residency.
Let's pause for a minute because that's a flash from the past. I remember Granger Westberg was constantly in my awareness. I never met him, but yeah, that was big news in 76, 77. He was constantly being mentioned. I didn't realize you were right there in the middle of it. So.
Oh yeah, I worked with him and his group carefully. I still buy about a case of his books 2 or 3 times a year, the book Good Grief. It's a little 10-step book on the stages of grief. And when one of my patients or one of their family members passes, I send them a letter or give them that book to help them kind of work through their stages of grief. So that is 50th year now. So
what became of that whole project? I've lost track of it, and gathered
the holistic centers. They went on for a while. There was one in Ohio. There were 2 in the Chicago area. There was one in Oak Park area, and the other one was in Hinsdale, which was a wealthy suburb of Western Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they finally ultimately wound down. I don't know the details of that. I had moved on.
Interesting. And do you know, he's probably not with us any longer, but.
Probably not, no. In fact, I think the new edition of the book is prefaced by one of his kids.
Uh-huh.
It was a testimony. So anyway, that kind of finished me up in residency at family medicine. And unlike most of my fellow residents, I didn't really have a job in mind when I left residency. And so I ended up kind of being a peripatetic itinerant doc for a year or 2. I'd been moonlighting in the ER. I did some nursing home work, some urgent care work. I worked with Meyer Eisenstein in their family practice unlimited home birth group for a couple of years. They delivered 2 of our babies at home. That was fun doing the home birthing. That was, again, another deep plunge into kind of the culture of self-care, self-directed medical treatment, even obstetrics, and using non-interventional obstetrics. So there was no anesthesia given at all in home deliveries, and someone needed to be anesthetized, they would take them to the hospital. But it was amazing to see, after having been trained in obstetrics as a family medicine doctor, the very different approach you could take as more of a midwife, having them around, having them in their house, hydrating, just finding a position of comfort, not doing an episiotomy. That was radical back then.
Mm-hmm.
Epidurals or cervical blocks, which were common, and just watching the labor. And of course, about 100% of those women breastfed. So that was an interesting time, but I really didn't. I had 2 kids at the time, and it was really too strenuous to be on OB call for the whole city of Chicago. And it was difficult to be out and about. And I'm not a good person if I don't get my night's sleep. So I ended up running an urgent care center there for about 7 years with Humana, and had a lot of good primary care skill, had a hospital practice. But my real dream was to be a country doctor. And my wife dragged me kicking and screaming to my dream at some point. I was just kind of afraid to leave the comfort of the city and the suburbs and everything, even though I didn't like living there. But just we ended up moving to a little town called Crestone, Colorado, which is a kind of very spiritual community. There's a lot
Yeah, I know about it. Friends that live
Buddhist
there.
places and Tibetans. Yeah, it was very, very
Yeah.
a hippie type of community. So we fit right in, honestly. And there was only about 200 people in that town, but they were all kind of very interesting folks. And set up a practice. Michelle's mom helped us buy an old farmhouse in a town called Moffett, which was a few miles away. And that had even less people. There were 60 people in Moffett. But people didn't think anything about driving 50 miles to see the doctor. I had just finished my acupuncture training with Joe Helms, and we'd just come back from China. And I was kind of a little bit discouraged that I wouldn't be able to practice acupuncture because I just put all this time into learning it. And I thought, well, I come out here to the country. These people are, not going to necessarily cotton to a Chicago doctor bringing a bunch of acupuncture needles. But the fact is, they were very happy with it. Anything got them back on their horse or their tractor at the end of the day was satisfactory. So I worked for a couple of years, maybe a year and a half in the emergency room while my practice built up. It was a small hospital, 50 beds, and but it was the regional medical center. And if we had to life flight somebody, it was to Colorado Springs, which is over a 14,000 foot range of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. So it was a good experience to get used to the valley. And we lived there. We bought a ranch, had 300 and some acre ranch with creek going through it and aspen trees and elk and deer and antelope running around. We had quite a few horses. We got horses from our patients in trade for medical care. We did a lot of bartering. People did money, so we got firewood cut, we got backhoe work done, we got horses because we had space for them in trade. The first horse we got was in foal, so we got 2 for 1 on that one. And then we kind of got into one of our patients had died, and his widow was trying to figure things out, and we ended up going into the sheep business with her. The Rambouillet sheep, and that was not a good idea. Our sheep barn burned and killed a bunch of sheep about 2 weeks into the business, and anyway, that was another adventure. But then after about I'm gonna say 9 years there, it was tough being a solo doctor in the country.
Yeah.
It wasn't tough taking care of patients, but it was tough doing the business side of it. And the insurance companies got worse and worse in terms of saying, well, you have to be, admitting privileges to a hospital. Well, the hospital was 50 miles away, and they wouldn't put anybody on the staff that wasn't within 20 minutes of the hospital. And then I had to have some 24-hour coverage, and several 100-page contracts would come, and I just didn't have time to review them or get attorneys to do them. So it got like, well, my dream had come true. I did it, I lived it, and we decided to do something different. One of the things that I really enjoyed being a country doctor was teaching. And by teaching, I had 2 areas. One was the ski patrol, and the other was the local ambulance crew. So I was a medical director at Wolf Creek and at Monarch Mountain, and also at for the local paramedic or ambulance crew. So we brought those ambulance drivers up from scoop and run to a paramedic level and really improved the functionality of the ski patrols. And so I enjoyed the teaching sessions that I had with them. So when Michelle and I decided to move, I really didn't want another practice, I guess, exactly. I kind of looked at a few, but I really thought maybe I should do something different, and that would be academics. So after 15 years or so of practice, and we moved here to Texas and got recruited to the UTMB, where I came in as an assistant professor in '96. They never had an acupuncturist on the staff. They never had a doctor interested in holistic medicine. So I was a bit of a maverick from the beginning. Got a fair amount of hate mail, actually, from my colleagues. I thought that my mentioning Andy Weil and medicine in the same term was somewhat heretical. But gradually we got some funding through the president's cabinet. We ended up getting one of the NCAM grants, R25, for building integrated, we call it CAM at that time, complementary alternative medicine curriculum into the medical school. Got another NIH grant on psychoneuroimmunology. So I got promoted fairly fast to professor over time. And I really have enjoyed the academic setting. The teaching with the students and residents is always stimulating. I still have an opportunity to bring them the integrated medicine dimensions that I cherish. I've enjoyed writing, working on a couple of books right now. I've had 3 out. My first was back in 2002, I think, called Complementary and Integrated Medicine for the Whole Person. And then I had another one, which was 1,000 Cures for 200 Diseases that I edited, and had 5 different paths: naturopathy, homeopathy, traditional Chinese medicine, conventional medicine, and botanical medicine, that was addressing common problems. And then the latest one was the Healthy Gut Workbook, which is through New Harbinger Press, and it's kind of a focus on integrative approaches to holistic or to GI health.
What's the title of that again?
That's called the Healthy Gut Workbook.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And we're actually working right now on a book chapter for Dave Rakel's new integrative medicine text on irritable bowel syndrome. So I've gotten to be more of a gut person than other. One of my more interests, especially the microbiome. I've had a lot of chances to stay in touch with the integrated medicine community over the years. UTMB was one of the early members of the academic consortium, which are now over 70 institutions that teach, practice, or research in integrative medicine. And I was president for that for a year. So I've been in leadership with that group. And I've had good relations with the folks through Scripps, Mimi Guarneri and Robert Akhtar, and they and other groups have had me teaching and talking at their conferences multiple times over the years. And that's always kind of that's where I find my tribe. Mark Blumenthal always shows up there with his joke fest, and other folks that we stay in touch with over the years. It's been a good situation. So anyway, that kind of brings us up to now.
Well, I'm curious, going back, you first encountered holism through Granger's, spelled with a W. When did you first encounter the H holism people? Were you part of Norm Shealy's AHMA? And
Right. So just back up a little bit. How I found out about Granger Westberg, I was applying for the ISP program, which is the Independent Study Program in medical school. It's a group of maybe 20 people out of our class of 200 that could be in this group. And I was interested in doing some research on biofeedback at the time. And Dr. Lichter, who was Ed Lichter, I remember his name's a psychiatrist, I believe, he was familiar with Granger. So he introduced me to him in my freshman year of medical school. wasn't very long after that I was introduced already. I had already heard about the Holistic Medical Association even before medical school. And I can't remember when I joined them. I think it was either during medical school or residency, but I became a HMA member. And in fact, at one point I was a board member with them. So met some really good people. Parts of what they did kind of flaked me out at times. So I kind of was in and out of a dance with them. Some of it was just a little bit beyond me. Norm Shealy, we were actually scheduled to go to a 14 or 15-day trip to India and visit these sacred sites and such with Norm Shealy and a tour group right after 9/11 happened. And then all travel, kind of like now, it all got shut down for a while. So we missed that opportunity to spend time with Dr. Shealy, who's a genius. I've seen him over the years, just amazing stuff that he does. Most recently at the American Academy of Medical Acupuncture meeting in Phoenix, he gave a keynote talk on the rings of fire and the rings of ice and the rings of it's pretty impressive. But anyway, so I've known the Holistic Medical Association and been a member off and on over many years. I think 96, when I started at UTMB, was maybe the first time I went to one of their conventions. And I think it was in Tucson or someplace. And I kind of got reconnected with that group. But I also got very connected with Andy Weil's integrative medicine program over there in Tucson, and UTMB was one of the pilot schools. We had 8 pilot schools that developed the integrative medicine in residency program. It was a 200-hour longitudinal online program for residents, mostly family medicine, but other internal pediatrics could do it, but it's primarily in family that we ran with that program for multiple years.
I also want to go way back to the very beginning. You said at age 2.5, you convinced your father to move to Phoenix because you wouldn't be able to get a job in Massachusetts.
Yeah, he actually wanted to move because he, as a mechanic, laying under big trucks, the ice was difficult and it was cold. He had arthritis, so he wanted to move to Phoenix or someplace warm. And I just tell the stories like, well, I was 2.5. I wanted to get a job, so let's go.
I wondered about the child labor laws in those days.
Well, my first job, actually, I was 6. My dad and I started a chicken business, and I would go around door to door and sell eggs. So it worked out.
Yeah, my father, we grew a lot of different kinds of strawberries and raspberries, and we'd sell them to the neighbors, 10 cents a quart. And I started mowing lawns about that age.
Yeah, I worked all the way through childhood. I was did lawn work. I was a station leader or paper route, and worked in Taco Bell. In college, I always worked in the student cafeterias, either washing dishes. Worked my way up to student manager in the women's dorm, which was fun. And but I always had to work because we didn't really have a lot of resources in our family. So I worked my way through college. I didn't really have much debt when I came out. Just.
I'm also curious. You said you were the oldest of 4. Were they brothers, sisters, or both? And what was that like?
So my Bernie is a year and a half behind me. My sister Joyce is about 5 years behind me, and then my littlest brother, he's kind of the surprise baby. He was born when I was 13. So yeah, he's done really well for himself. He lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, and owns a big concrete construction company there. Bernie's retired truck driver, and Joyce is a crossing guard.
Now, doesn't sound like you decided to go into medicine when you were a kid. It was after your biology experience on the ships.
Well, I was kind of the mad scientist in the neighborhood. I always was interested in science. So my dad had a little tool shed out back, and I had a laboratory out there from about third grade on to maybe time I was in high school. I always out there doing all kinds of experiments. So I thought I'd be a chemist. My hero was Thomas Edison. I read every book about Thomas Edison that I could. And then during high school, one of my friends turned me on to Jacques Cousteau, and he was doing all the oceanography, photography then. And I thought, well, that'd be fun. Maybe I'd be a marine biologist. And so all through college, I was a biology degree I was to do marine biology, but I never really had thought to do medicine, honestly. I kind of just, I don't know why. I'd just say, well, I don't like blood or guts or something. I'd say something trivial. But it never really interested me until kind of pretty much close to my graduation from college, that I started having some intersections through some personal health issues that I was having with the healthcare establishment. I thought, might be something I should consider. So.
And what college did you go to? I didn't catch the name.
Arizona State in Tempe. Arizona State University. Yep.
Okay. So we're up to present time. What's most on your mind these days? What thrills you?
Well, my wife and I just set up a endowment for integrative medicine at UTMB, so that will endure past my retirement era. I'm probably going to cut back my schedule in a couple of years or so, just to part-time, but I'd still want to continue teaching. I'm working on a couple of books I mentioned that I have maybe 500 or 600 columns that I've done for the local paper on health-related topics, mostly mind, body, and spirit kind of focus, and that together, and proceeds from that will go into this endowment. I'm also working on a science fiction apocalyptic Christian thriller called A Little Child Shall Lead Them, and it's a book I wrote, honestly, about 40 years ago, and it's been gathering dust. Right now, it seems somewhat prophetic.
Yeah.
The state of the world. So I'm working through that one. And we started a fellowship in integrative medicine at UTMB, and I want to keep that going. And we've had some really wonderful fellows. Continue teaching students and residents on the integrative space. I enjoy seeing my patients. I've even thought of maybe if I leave university working maybe with a holistic chiropractic center that's about 2 blocks from my house, just part-time as another way to kind of keep myself busy. We've wanted to do a lot of travel. We have done a lot of travel. We were be in Europe this summer. We got off the diamond, as I shared with you earlier, doing a fair amount of cruising. So that's something we're not sure how the travel industry is going to recover.
Excuse me. Yeah.
We've still got some bucket list places. We went to the Holy Lands. This summer we're going to go to Utah National Parks. We're going to do a road trip there. We've got some places in South America that we haven't seen. I would love to go back to Australia or New Zealand at some place. One of my favorite places to visit. So anyway, that's kind of
busy man. And
down the line.
Your 37-page CV was quite a shocker.
Yeah, we had to cut some pages out of it. It was longer than that, so I just kind of abrogated anything before 2005. I guess some of that's shortened. Yeah, it was a little long. It's kind of a logbook of what I've been doing, and we just kind of keep it updated. I'm doing some editorial reviewing. I got an article yesterday from Integrative Cancer Therapies Journal. I'm on their board. I'm on the Explore editorial board. and the global advances in health and healing. So I enjoy doing reviews of articles and self-publishing from time to time.
Now, you said you got some hate mail when you first went to the university. I gather that settled down. What do they think now? Those same guys still are women too.
Oh yeah, I'm the go-to person. I get invited to do the grand rounds and the resident teaching on, like, anesthesia always wants us to come and talk about botanicals and how those might interact. One guy I thought about was, I had gotten a small grant, like $25,000 grant from the president's cabinet to start a website in 1998. Now, websites were not in 1998 very much like they are now, but it was a start, and it was trying to put together in the university context evidence-based compendium of information about integrative medicine, complementary medicine, links to reliable resources. And there were not so many at that time. So we had to kind of build it from scratch. But I do remember Fritz, one of our internal medicine faculty, and I really respect him and his wife both. But initially, when he saw a allusion to Dr. Andy Weil in my website, he says, "That's all we need to know about this guy. He's a quack," you know. So I was thrown out the window with Andy, but at least we were in good company.
So, but now that's all died down, and
oh yeah, I mean, I used to do my acupuncture practice was largely self-referred initially, but now I get referrals. We have integrative oncology consultation service. We get referrals for that, for pain management, integrated pain management. So we see a lot of people are just realizing that this kind of medicine in the context of opiate overdoses and epidemic and kind of other kind of chronic diseases aren't very treatable in the context of oncology. There's a lot of space for holistic and integrated care, and so we get referrals now. And that's part of our system.
Mm. Yeah, I wasn't aware until I interviewed Dave Rakel at the 70 different members of the consortium and how things are really taken off. So I don't think that's widely known among the mainstream, but it's encouraging.
Do you know John Weeks? Have you talked to him?
No, I haven't. I don't know him.
Yeah, you need to connect up with John. John's an amazing guy. He's doing editorial work, I think, for Global Advances now. But he's had a newsletter for many years that's covered this whole space, and he was one of the people that really was involved initially when we started the consortium in trying to kind of help us create strategic directions and political positioning and such.
Mm.
There's a similar consortium, I think it's called AHCIM or something like that, that is built up not of medical schools, but naturopathic schools, chiropractic schools, TCM schools, that kind of thing.
Mm.
John was very involved with helping formulate that. In fact, I think he served in some leadership roles in that for a while. But you should look John Weeks up. I think he'd be a great one for your series.
Okay. Now, another topic I'd like to get your thoughts on, the pandemic that we're in the midst of and the differing viewpoints. Some people think that the cure may be worse than the disease when you look at the death rate of unemployment. I learned this from Robert Kennedy Jr. that well-documented data from the 60s that for every point of unemployment, you get 37,000 deaths, which is probably doubled by now because the population has doubled. But what are your thoughts on the lockdown and where we're going. And
Well, you know, the population issue is the problem. That Larry Dossi just sent me an interesting article about how kind of overpopulation of human beings has degraded the environment so much that these zoonotic diseases are emerging because we're destroying rainforests, we're destroying other kinds of places where these viruses lived safely and secretly in bats and monkeys and bacteria, and now we're kind of up interfacing with them and they're escaping. I'm reading a fascinating book right now called Spillover. It was written in 2012, and the author is just speculating on when's the next big one going to come. It's not like the big one that you guys think about in California, the big earthquake. He's saying the next big one is going to be a pandemic, and it's going to, we're not sure where it's going to come from, but writing in 2012, he said it could come from a rainforest or it could come from a market in southern China. It was highly prophetic that with our disturbing of the environment and climate, we are making the seeds of our own destruction from these viruses. So that I'm concerned is actually going to be a recurrent issue as we go forward. I do think, if I'm hearing you correctly, I think the lockdown has been, I called it initially a panic-demic because there was such panic about it. It's doing so much health counseling to patients over the phone, talking them off the COVID anxiety cliff. Such fear, and when people have fear, instead of love, they focus on the fear and all the negative outcomes, and then they don't always react wisely. So I think to a certain amount, the social distancing was necessary and helpful. I think the lockdown is going to do pretty much permanent damage to the world economy. The United States, all these people out of work. I feel really horrible for many people. Many businesses are going out. So I think you're probably right when you say the cure is worse than the disease. We've lost a lot more people to just routine influenza or cancer or heart disease than we have to this disease. So it's just because it's novel and newly emerging disease, and we have little experience with it, that people are overreacting in my view. But you know, I'm not the wisest person on the planet. There's a lot of different people that felt like this was necessary. But I think it's time to kind of relook our response at this point. Look at food chains have been disrupted, and people are going to be starving.
Yeah. So in wrapping up, what kind of wisdom do you want to impart to future generations that we hope will be watching this after we're gone?
Well, I can share some of my favorite authors, which would be Ralph Waldo Emerson and Lao Tzu and William James. Those are people that have written deeply about things that have concerned me. Teilhard de Chardin is another. I think I approach it from that way because I don't think any one person has the full message. I think the broader read we are in the arts and humanities as well as the sciences, the better we are prepared to face a future that is not like the past. And we have to be able to adapt. This is where Lao Tzu's become one of my most go-to people when there's any kind of disturbance. He says, what do you do to clear a muddy pool? You let it settle, you wait, you take time, and you spend time in silence. I do think, for me, my spiritual roots come out of Judeo-Christian Taoism, I call it, but it has been an anchor for me during this very difficult time to have a strong faith. Michelle and I are just reading a book by Kilmer called I'm Your Huckleberry. Al was a Christian Scientist also, or is. And he said, the difference between heaven and hell is the difference between faith and doubt, which I thought was a profound comment to say. So I think having faith and being rooted in not only worldly and material knowledge and philosophy, but a spiritual practice is essential for good health.
Mm. That sounds like a good concluding wrap up there.